So we would like to start. Sit down if you. We would like to start. Jiyan Azadi. Jiyan Azadi. Jiyan Azadi. Behevran, emitayin şoreşi bihunin. We test udile me hertim behevdura greydaybe.
Yaslan, 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 cirin azam
Jin, Jian, Azadi. Thanks to Ecology to preparing this performance. And we would like to welcome you all to the second International Women's Conference here in Berlin. But first of all, we would like to call you to stand 1 minute silence for all martyrs in the world. Şehit Namar'ın. Şehit Namar'ın. So once again, we would like to welcome you not only to this conference, but also for such a historical day. Women from all over the world came together today to say the same statement. Our revolution is liberating life. So this day is not just a day as every day. This day is a day full of Jinergie. It's a day full of women's energy. It's a day where so many women came together to show that we are united, that we are strong, and that we have to change the world, that we have to smash patriarchy. So once again, welcome all. Of course, thanks to all the friends in the organization that helped to prepare this conference, and also for the huge effort that they gave to make this conference possible. Thanks to them. Also for the network Women's Weaving Future to organize this conference, of course. Our first speech will be from Melika Yashar. She is from the Kurdish women's movement, and she will make the opening speech for today in the name of the organization we call Haval Melika.
Thank you. I will do my speak in my mother language, in Kurdish. هفرين هجا خوشكو هفالين هجا ودوستين هجا هون بخير هاتن كونفرانسا ميا دو يمين آناو نتوي ياكو بطورا جن پیشروجا خود خوینه کو ام ایرو لور لدار دخن بحمو جوش و کلجانا خواه وی جواتا کو سینور زمان سقه و ماویا نابرا اردنگاریان بدرانه بون نزاره بونا
I greet this. I greet you all. First of all, I express my gratitude for all the collective work to prepare this conference. First of all, I express my gratitude to the power, hope, and effort of all the women who helped create this great and ambitious gathering. I want to remember, with respect and gratitude, the struggling, revolutionary women who lost their lives while illuminating our world that domination wants to darken. These women are with us in this hall right now as photographs, and they continue to live in our struggles. I commemorate Jina Amini, a Kurdish woman who was murdered by the Iranian regime, and our comrade Nagahana Karsel, who was brutally assassinated by the Turkish state. Our anger about these feminicides is still very fresh, and so is our great pain. But we will not succumb to pain and anger. We will struggle to build a world that these women desired and deserve to live in. We will fight for everything we have inherited from thousands of years of women's struggle. We will fight for, in doing so, we will fight for everyone. I feel this excitement of this historical moment as deeply as everyone in this hall. The main reason for this is that the times we live in show us that the women's revolution is possible in every respect. We can hear the footsteps of the women's revolution. In the first quarter of the 21st century, we struggle to create and preserve hope, resistance, sociality, ethics and aesthetics, and morality. We resisted to transform this age, marked by women's liberation struggles, into a time in which a women-centered life can be built. We increased our struggle to overcome all obstacles to our claim to change the world, made unlivable by male domination, capitalism, and hegemonic powers. We see the rise of popular uprisings led by women in Iran and Rojhelat, eastern Kurdistan. We see women waging a war for existence against the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. We women fight for the right to abortion in Argentina. We see increasing objections globally to the climate crisis and ecological destruction. We see so much resistance everywhere against fascism and economic exploitation. Seen young women resisting not only with their weapons, but with their smiles and courage against ISIS, the most sinister form of male domination, and against the colonizer Turkish state, ISIS' accomplice. In truth, these struggles, this courage, and this spirit tell us what we believe in. To realize our visions and to do justice to these struggles around the world, we promise that we will resist and defeat this system, which leads a broad war front against women and uses all the means at its disposal for feminicide. We will ensure that our refusals, resistances, struggles, organizations, and efforts become more systemized. We will find our way to follow in the footsteps of this truth. In this hall, we come together as women's movements, collectives, organizations, civil organizations, academics and activists from 41 countries from different continents. We're here because we want to decide how we will build our future. We want to share our struggle, experience, and energy with each other. Now, in 2022, we want to take more concrete steps towards World Women's Democratic Confederalism, which was proposed at the first conference we held in Frankfurt in 2018. We will draw from the power of the intellectual and practical knowledge needed for women's confederalism. Over the next days, our valuable participants will share perspectives and struggles from different geographies. Dear friends, while sharing our experiences gives us great hope and strength in the first conference, in this conference, we need to go beyond that and instead draw a roadmap and chart a course to radically defeat the system. We need a route that will unite women from different geographies, peoples, classes, social groups, and beliefs. For this, it is time to unite our power and determine a sense of a common mind, strategy, line of action and politics. That is, to accumulate our power and energy in one place. The time has come to take actual steps to meet this goal. The community here and the social connection it represents are the most concrete picture showing the formation and existence of this common will. Over the next 2 days, presentations and discussions will contribute to the emergence of this collective will. In addition, we will deepen our discussions with the workshops prepared with the methods and contributions of genealogy. The issues we will discuss were collectively determined to address the basic needs, difficulties, and commonalities of women's struggles around the world. In the last session, we will talk about the concrete steps needed to create the bonds that women of the world must establish with each other in order to develop organizational tools needed for common struggle. Dear friends, all of your valuable opinions and suggestions will strengthen the creation of these steps. The foundations of this 2-day meeting are powerful, come from many different contexts. Every single meeting in which we came together paved the way for this road. The discussions we conducted in different geographies, from the creation of the conference program to the determination of the participants, were a sign of the richness and depth of a common mind of resisting women. The passion of every woman involved in the preparations which expresses this. Our volunteer translator group of 63 people will interpret all speeches into 8 languages for 2 days. Members of Gemeinsam Kämpfen and Women Defend Rojava have been working incredibly hard to meet our transportation and logistical needs. Genealogy committees have been working months in advance for the preparation of the workshops. Kurdish families and the Kurdish community, as well as our internationalist friends in Berlin, are offering, and the Kurdish Women's Assembly, Destan, the Kurdish Women's Assembly, Destan, are offering the essence of Kurdish hospitality. Thank you to the Technical University of Berlin and ASTA for hosting our conference, to our team who worked on graphics, information, and press, and to those who could not attend these 2 days of these conference for different reasons. We thank you all. Finally, I would like to express my endless greetings and thanks to each of the unnamed heroines who contributed to the organization, but especially who will make to free life, who continue the fight for liberation of life behind bars. We promise we will realize their utopias. In the name of the Network of Women Weaving the Future from Berlin, we send our revolutionary love and greetings to all political prisoners. We believe, and especially to Abdul Öcalan, a comrade of the women's struggle in Kurdistan, with the belief that we will meet all of them in freedom. Their freedom is our freedom. I want to end this welcoming speech with our slogan, that has been enchanting the world over the past weeks. It is our life philosophy, our promise of freedom. It is a gift from the women of Kurdistan to the liberation struggle of women around the world against patriarchy, against capitalism, and against fascism and all forms of oppression upon women. Once more we say, women, life, freedom, Jin, Jian, Azadi.
Thanks for Melika Yashar. We would like to make two announcements. First of all, there's also childcare. It's in room 3003A. So the friends that are responsible could take the children and go upstairs. Also, as you know, there are like Twitter accounts and also Instagram accounts for Women Weaving Future. It's important that you share and also try, share on social media, this conference. So this was the opening speech. Some of you know we had the first International Women's Conference in Frankfurt, and some of you were there also. Now we would like to watch a video together. It's from the video, it's the inside of 2018 when the first International Women's Conference was.
The Women Weaving the Future Network organized its first International Women's Conference, entitled Revolution in the Making, on the 6th and 7th of October in 2018 in Frankfurt, Germany. More than 500 women from all around the world came together in Frankfurt and discussed how we will collectively create the future and contribute towards a women's revolution. Representatives of the most impressive, influential, and inspirational women's movements and struggles shared experiences and developed common ideas. In doing so, they enclosed their own colors and motives to the future we started to weave together. Thousands of years of life and knowledge are transmitted through culture. For many of us, culture marks a field of struggle and resistance. That's why the Revolution in the Making conference started with a choreographical opening act with Kurdish, Afghan, Tamil, Yazidi, Brazilian, Mexican, Philippine, and Honduras women giving messages of women's struggle in their native languages. The opening speech of the conference was made by Dilber Aydin from the Kurdistan Women's Movement. She highlighted the significance of Abdullah Öcalan, who has been held captive by NATO for nearly 24 years on a prison island. His thesis for the 21st century is that it is the era of women's liberation. Following many greeting messages, the first session, Crisis of Patriarchy and its Systemic War on Women, started. Debbie Bookchin from the United States moderated this session, which aimed to summarize the challenges and opportunities during this time in which we find ourselves. Miriam Miranda, representative of Ofrane from Honduras, in her speech on the climax of patriarchy, capitalism's misogyny, pursued the question of how and why the male-dominant system has reached its highest level in the capitalist age. Miriam underlined that we need to decolonize as women and liberate ourselves from capitalist values. In her speech titled The Breakdown of the 21st Century, Women's Take on Challenges and Opportunities, Claudia Carroll, journalist and activist from Argentina, assessed the risks and opportunities that the crisis of the patriarchal system harbors for women's liberation. Claudia drew attention on the importance of piecing together the struggles for our bodies and the earth. The speech, Sexism and its Connection with the Holy Trinity of Capitalism, was given by the sociologist Nazan Ustundag, who explained how capitalist modernity is reproducing itself based on the four main ideological pillars of sexism, nationalism, religionism, and scientism. Afterwards, Nazan went on to question how to navigate nationalism, religionism, and scientism in the struggle against sexism. The first day of the conference continued with workshops, in which different forms of patriarchal capitalist attacks on women were analyzed and perspectives of struggles were developed. The topic of the workshops were the rise of fascist regimes and their impact on women, femicide, sexual violence and self-defense, ecology, matriarchal communities and social identities, war, displacement, and politics of migration, colonialism, capitalist modernity, and impacts on women, feminization of poverty and communalist economy, women and alternative media, putting our theory to practice. The second day of the conference started with a panel on the history, ideology, and development of the Kurdistan women's liberation movement. The session titled Women's Struggle for Freedom, From FIS to Kobani, From Minbish to Raqqa, was moderated by Rahila Gupta, author and activist from Southall Black Sisters in the UK. Haskar Kirmizigul from the Genealogy Committee in Europe explained how the Kurdish women's movement came to the conclusion that women's liberation is at the forefront of every liberation struggle, even of the country. At that point in time, Evan Swade was the spokeswoman of Congresstar, which is the civil society umbrella organization of the women's movement in Rojava. She outlined the importance of turning our gains as women into a continuous and sustainable system in order to create lasting change. The ideas of women's liberation struggle need to replace the design of the patriarchal order if we do not want to reproduce the dominant system. Khawla Al-Isa Ahlamud, then the co-chair of the People's Council of Raqqa, the former capital of the Islamic State, focused on the importance of women's self-defense, as opposed to being protected by others. Khawla also talked about the women's life under ISIS rule in Raqqa, and what the liberation through the women's protection units, the YPG, meant to Arab women from the region. Foza Youssef, who was co-chair of the Executive Council of the Northern Syria Democratic Federation at the time, also made a speech. She shared information on the organizational model of the women's movement in Rojava and northern Syria. Foza underlined the importance of autonomous women's organization for the whole democratic movement. After this input in the theoretical and practical experiences of the Kurdish women's movement, the representatives of 5 struggles met on the panel titled Different Localities, Universal Struggles, Experiences of Women's Movements, moderated by Yvonne Hein. Jade Daniels, representative of Black Lives Matter USA, talked about the ungrievability of Black lives and why white supremacy is sexist. In her speech, Jade said that those seeking liberation must also seek out the truth and learn of the contributions of Black women. Nazira Goreya, founding member of the Syriac Women's Council and co-chair of the Executive Council of Jazeera Canton in North and East Syria, made a speech titled The Awakening of the Children of the Goddess, Second Women's Revolution in the Middle East. Nazira spoke about the connection between revolution being women-led and the construction of a new model based on the democratic coexistence of the peoples of various religions, ethnicities, and other identities in the region. Joanne Guan, representative of the Philippine women's movement, Gabriela, shared their experiences in building women's alliances. She examined the questions: how can we unite despite our differences? Which principles and understanding is needed for a common struggle? What are the difficulties and achievements of alliances? And how is it possible to develop a common organizing model while protecting autonomy? The Argentine-Brazilian anthropologist Rita Segato gave a speech on the movement Ni Una Menos and focused on the question, what kind of organization is needed in order to stop femicide? Rita underlined that in Latin America, the reality of violence against the bodies of women is not seen as intrinsic to femicide. She further expanded that the DNA of the nation state consists of the patriarchal mentality. Saleh Ghaffar, spokesperson of the Afghan Solidarity Party, concentrated in her talk on the damage the NATO occupation has created for Afghan women's freedom struggle. She discussed the results of the NGOization of the women's movement, saying these women's organizations are a big obstacle in the way of real women's movements. The final session of the conference, titled Revolution in the Making, Weaving Our Future Together, was moderated by Meryl Chichek from the Kurdish Women's Relations Office. At this session, Siana Bangura, on behalf of the Black Lives Matter UK, Rada de Souza, professor at the Westminster University, Shireen Abu al-Naga from Cairo University, Rojda Yildirim from the Kurdish Women's Movement, and Silvia Marcos, author and researcher from Mexico, tried to crystallize the key findings of the conference with regard to our future struggle. Siana underlined, our commitment to all Black lives means that we center the experience of the most marginalized voices, including queer, trans, undocumented, disabled, Muslim, women and non-binary, HIV positive, and working class Black people. Rada said, colonialism colonized our land as well as our minds. The educated, upper caste, urban women often think the solutions will come from imitating the West, from the gender studies departments in Oxford and Harvard universities, the very forces that alienated them from the peasant and lower caste women. Shireen pointed out, we need to embrace our differences under one umbrella, that of women's lives matter, which is far different from global sisterhood. Rojda explained, as the Kurdish women's movement, before starting a new campaign, we critically review the past period. We do not pass the buck to the men or try to explain ourselves always with patriarchy. First, we make self-criticism. The dynamic of critique and self-critique is the system that ensures the constant renewing of the Kurdish movement. Sylvia illustrated, within the Mesoamerican cosmovision, nowhere is there a concept of equality. The whole cosmos is conceived of elements that balance against each other through their differences and thus create equilibrium. And finally, at the end of our 2 days of strong and spirited gathering, full of inspiration, hope, and belief, revolutionary passion and joy, we declared, we are going to take what belongs to us, our strength and our freedom. We will do this in spite of the extreme brutality that patriarchy forces us to face. In all our different ways, together, we are weaving our future. Now is the time to understand, to value, to feel, and to support all of the different struggles. And above all, it is important to become part of these struggles. We must organize, link, and network our organizations, and we must begin building the Women's World Democratic Confederalism. We declare that we will continue our fight together for the freedom of each and all of us. We will not allow any woman to be hurt. We will win our fight against patriarchy. We will create the new institutions of a new and free society. We declare that a revolution is in the making. The recent crisis of capitalism is a result of our struggles, and the now, the present, gives us the historical opportunity to turn this century, the 21st century, into the century of women and all peoples. And lastly, we as Jinn want our Jian based on Azadi.
So before we start, okay. Okay. For the translators, applause. All our translators doing today, they are translating by heart, and also like they are free, like they are activist friends, and without them, this conference wouldn't be possible. So thanks to you again. But they also say, especially for the panelists, to speak slowly and to talk clearly for them to make it easier to translate. Yeah, and we will be careful. So, war, discrimination, pandemics, social crisis, economical crisis, ecological crisis. We know that these are results of the patriarchy and also of the Third World War. And we also know that the main target is always women. And there are a lot of many faces of attacks. A lot of methods are getting used to try to break the women, to try to like smash the energy of women, especially in these times. And we are right now, we live in this Third World War. And what we try today is we will make this our first session. The first panel will be Third World War, and also smashing the armor of immunity of the state and the dominant male. And we would like to call Megan Baudet, Director of Research of the Kurdish Peace Institute in Washington, on the stage, and we would like to start with the first panel.
Well, thank you, and thank you all to the organizers and to everyone attending this conference. So when we say we're living in a third world war, we're talking about, first of all, a time of unprecedented conflict, both between states seeking hegemony and by states against their peoples and other peoples elsewhere in the region. We're talking about a conflict between powerful states, powerful individuals, and powerful corporations against the environment on which all life on Earth relies to live. This ecocidal war on the resources, the nature, the very basis of life on Earth. And we're talking about a war, again, by an unchecked capitalist system in which a few people accumulate massive amounts of wealth on a greater scale than ever before, while waging war on the poor and working people who make up the most of humanity's population. And what all of these wars have in common in their targeting of the oppressed is that women are hit the hardest. Because as we know from the Kurdish women's movement and many other women's movements, it was the oppression of women that created the oppressive hierarchies that developed in societies and expanded into this imperialist, autocratic, patriarchal, capitalist, ecocidal system. And so with that, it is the resistance of women and women's efforts to fight back as the people hit the hardest by these conflicts that has the possibility of getting us out of this third world war and building a more democratic, just future. So we're honored to be able to hear from women in several of these global struggles against this system today. In our first session, where we'll discuss state violence over women and society and how this is based on dominant male violence. Our first speaker will be Nilüfer Koç from the Kurdistan National Congress, discussing women's resistance to male and state violence in the context of this Third World War. Welcome, Nilüfer.
Okay. Thank you very much for the organizers to invite me to speak at a very historical conference. I personally do believe it's the right time to speak how to build our future as women, since others are trying to destroy our future. And as Megan said, I'm not that sure if we all agree to summarize the happenings in our century, in our today's. When we summarize all the wars, the armed conflicts, the clashes, ecological destruction, climate change, feminization of poverty, etc., etc. Can we call it the Third World War? I think we as women, however we are organized or individuals, we are quite late to give the whole stuff a name. The problem starts itself. Are we agree to call the problems of the century the Third World War? All the members of the NATO and many states who are now looking for spreading of the interests, like UK, the US, they already start to call it the Third World War. The Kurdish freedom movement led by Abdullah Öcalan, the president, the leader of the Kurdish people and a very close comrade of the Kurdish women's movement and Kurdish women, start to raise awareness amongst the Kurdish women and generally the Kurdish movement, saying, we come up in the Third World War with the beginning of the 90s. So we already start to understand what kind of changes came from the 90s until today, and 2010 onwards, we often heard in his analysis the terminology of the Third World War. Now experts and academicians are talking about 488 wars, clashes, conflicts in the world. All these are happening on the earth. But we don't know what they are doing in space, because we know that something happened also in space. And I thought one of the main important things for us is not just to looking who is going to do what kind of war and for what reason, because all the wars, they have names, and we know their location, we know where the wars are happening. But we as women, I think, should think differently and have a different perspective on the terminology of war. War is not just the issue of military clashes or is a stage where violence, physical violence is mostly used. No. There's a war in the world that doesn't have a name, it's not mentioned anywhere. Since the beginning of patriarchy a few thousand years ago, some say 5,000 years, some say 7,000 years ago, there's continuation of permanent circumstances of war against women, which we call feminicide. So the war, from the perspective of women, starts with the patriarchy. And it achieved today its peak with the finance capitalism, or some call it imperialism. For us as women, is there important not just being focusing on the wars which are carried out by armed clashes by armies, because the most important thing for us as women is to know that the wars are a mask to cover the thought of hegemony. unless we won't understand this relation between the thought which is creating the problems, which we say is hegemonial of patriarchy, then we will be kept busy with the results of the wars. Creating the alternative means creating alternative against the thought, the mindset. In our days, when we are facing, particularly during the pandemic time, feminization of poverty spread, when was deepening, while domestic violence, state-produced violence is spreading all around the world. And I say this century needs for us as women, like we did in the Kurdish women's movement, we need a women's freedom ideology to overcome the patriarchal ideology, which is the cause of today's conflicts and violence against women in the society. How can we act together if we don't have common principles, which we can summarize in a kind of global women's ideology? Women's global liberation ideology. So the system is manipulating us by the mainstream media to keep us busy now recently with the Ukrainian war. We don't know, we are forced to take part, whether for one man or another man. And this mistake is also happening in some of our women's movement and movements in which women are active defending peace. We learned in the Kurdish women's movement that if you want to liberate life, because we are not going to liberate life because we are victims of a life made by others, no. Because we know there was a part of history which was the longest term of peace. I'm not talking about paradise of history when the mother-ruled societies have been able of integration, of inclusion. So, but comparing today, it was a kind of paradise, the mother-ruled society. So we're looking, the alternative is laying in the history of the women's in our region of Mesopotamia. So the issue is how to updating this to the 21st century. And I do believe this century gave us as a golden opportunity, particularly as women. We are the problem, we are made into problem, but we have also the solution. That's why historical knowledge meant for us as women, wherever we come from, it's a vital part of our identity. And I do believe that the state, however, is committing every time crimes against humanity, against the women. We see the pictures of the women because violence of women is very visible. Look at Nagihan Akarsel, or look at Gina Amini, or other heroic women. We are seeing their pictures here from all around the world. So killing, using violence won't stop us because we know that the capitalist system at its peak today, is in a deep crisis. The transfer of hegemonial power from the Ottoman Empire to UK and then now to the US. We know that the US is, however, is looking to be the center of the hegemonial power of the 21st century, but they have problems. It's not so easy to control the world. They have created everywhere wars. They turned our areas in wars. Iraq, Syria, Rojava, Kurdistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Asia Pacific, the problem of food, the problem of ecological destruction, monopolization, that the minority is getting all the values of the majority of the humanity. So all around you look, it's a crisis. There's a period, we are talking a period of chaos. The US insists to become the center of the hegemony of the 21st century. But today's word is a word of multipolarism, multilateralism. It's not so easy because there is a widespreading competition between each of the states. When we talk about 193 states member of the UN, each of them are fighting against each other because of their interests and profits. But in one, they can come together. If there is a power which is creating alternative to the hegemonial system, then they will be attacked like the women in Kurdistan, like Nagihan Akar said. So that's the reason why they are keeping blind eye of Turkey, arresting Kurdish female politicians, Kurdish fighters, using chemical weapons, using all arts of forbidden arms. Why? Because Kurdistan, led by the Kurdish women's movement, is becoming the alternative for a war zone of Middle East. There's an alternative, and you see all the international institutions are keeping blind eye because the capitalist system knows in Kurdistan there's alternative. So the only fear, however, they're in competition with each other, the states, is that someone can create an alternative. And that's why manipulating through mainstream media and also using military aggression like we are experiencing in Kurdistan. But we see none of the conflicts have been solved, nor the conflict in Libya, in Myanmar, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, wherever you look, the world is burning. So the rulers can't rule. And we, the one who have been ruled as women, we say you can't rule us anymore. So this is exactly the time which offers us opportunity to decide for self-determination as women. And that's why I do believe that this conference is happening in the right time and it's calling to us, women keep together. And we see that the philosophy of the Kurdish women's movement, it's just easy to say Jinjian Azadi, but behind Jinjian Azadi is the experience of 30 years struggle of the Kurdish women's movement. Behind the Jinjian Azadi slogan are the efforts of 30 years of Abdullah Öcalan's contribution to the Kurdish women's movement. And we see that in Middle Eastern area, particularly when we speak about the violence of state, which to one I would say Iran is a leading power, very misogynic state structure, but is shaped by women. So it's possible even to bring down a very anti-women regime like the Iranian one. We have seen that women, if they're organized, they can break the paramilitary forces of the 21st century. These are Taliban in Afghanistan, Boko Haram in Nigeria, and in our region, I don't know, I guess we have 70 of these groups. Tahrir al-Sham, Daesh, I don't know, whatever. So, but if we are organized, we can overcome all these paramilitary forces, the instruments in which whom they want to firstly weaken the women, scaring the women, and by doing so, hostilizing the society. In Kurdistan, we show it's possible if you're organized, you can defeat them. And since Joe Biden, Jens Stoltenberg, or Xi Jinping, or Vladimir Putin, all of them are in a deep crisis, then it's time for the sisters to take the responsibility for the future of the 21st century. In this regard, I would say again, Jinjian Azadi, with this we will succeed.
Thank you for your contribution and for that introduction to the stakes of what it is that women are struggling against in various contexts in their struggles for freedom. So at this time, our next speaker will be Mariam Rawi from the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan. And I'd like to make a note here for all media and attendees for security purposes. Mariam has requested that she not be filmed or her image depicted in any way, but she wants it to be known that the women of Afghanistan were here and were present to discuss their struggle. So please report on her words and her contribution, her discussion of her movement, but do not show her face or her image in any way. Thank you. Mariam, please join us, and may the speakers for our next two panels in this session come up here as well.
Hello. Ez carek di Kurdî jî bibêjim ji bo hevalên çepîmenî gerek em wî hevalê nekşînin kamerayê ji ber ku bin şert û mecin cuda da tevlî konferansê bibe ji bo wî ev nekişandin baş e. Ne fotoğraf ne video û gerek ney parvekirin jî ê wî hevalê. Tamam? Nekşînin baş e û taybet zindî jî nekşînin. Spas.
And just once again, for the remaining 2 sessions of our panel, can our speakers for our session on Ecocide, Lolita Chavez and Ariel Saleh, and our speakers for our section on Making Invisible Labor Visible, Genevieve Vaughn and Kavita Krishnan, please come to the stage. I will introduce them when their incredible sessions and their discussions come up, but please join us on stage right now.
Thank you. Greetings to all sisters and comrades. On behalf of the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, RAWA, I would first of all like to extend sincere thanks to the network of Women Weaving Future for providing this privileged opportunity to speak in the 2nd International Conference of Women. I come from Afghanistan, from a land under domination of the most brutal group of ignorant religious fascists.
جهکی کو دستهلداری هیچ چی گروپن هری یک گروپن هری خوف یا دستهلداری اوله کو تجاوز دکین او کت و کوی نینه دیروکا مدرن از جهکی تم او کوربوینا تراژدی و کت خواری نتنه بیتشتن کوتن گوتین یانجیتن دیتین گردای و نتنه علاقه بی هیاب هیه نتنه اوه کو جن کار کار بکه یان جن کار جمال خود درکبه اما او تراژدی اوه کو او سیخنیتا
to attend the school or seek education. In my country, not only women are main victim, but these medieval-minded extremists destroy every sign of human dignity, liberty, and democracy. One of the key changes in the Middle East over the last decades has been the rise of political Islam, Islamism, and Islamic fundamentalism. From the time it was founded, the Muslim Brotherhood built a close connection with what was, and still is, by far the most reactionary, anti-democratic, anti-women power on earth. A characteristic hallmark of Islamic fundamentalism creature is their inhuman attitude towards women and their misogynism. The atrocities against women and the plight of Afghan women under the fundamentalist Taliban probably will make the regime of Iran and Saudi Arabia feel ashamed. The mentality and ideology of Taliban represent the patriarchal feudal system where women are not counted as human beings, but only those machines who are responsible to bring boys, not even girls, to this world and to carry out house chores. Another important characteristic of the Islamic fundamentalist forces are that they react to the consequences of capitalism, as well as to imperialist domination in imperialist wars. What's being seen in our devastated country is due to the existence of few fascists and ultra-criminal fundamentalists who are linked with institutions such as CIA, in the government such as Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and many others. Fundamentalist jihadi warlords such as Rabbani, Masood, Gulbuddin, Khalili, Mazari, Sayyaf, Dostum. These are those fundamentalist leaders who were masters in bloodbath, looting of our lives, honor, and property of our people. They were also pumped by the funds and weapons of CIA to fight against the Soviet occupiers and their favorite regime, but also in the meanwhile, to eradicate all Afghan democratic, progressive, and leftist occupation. Today, the United States and NATO are talking about a strategic failure. In Afghanistan, where they spent 20 years, and during this war, they massacred tens and thousands of innocent Afghans, and finally handed over our country with 85 billion worth weapons to the military and military equipment to their Taliban stooges. The US official each spoke of being surprised by the fall of Kabul, but the reality is that everything went according to the plan. The US imperialism, in accordance with the usual policy, spent 20 years in backing rotten and corrupt regime of Karzai in Ghani, empowering the jihadi drug lords in mafia, and painted them modern and intellectuals. But on the other hand, exactly at the same time, they enjoyed playing dirty games with Taliban terrorists and maintaining and strengthening them for the future use. The release of several Taliban leaders from Guantanamo Bay, the removal of some of their leaders' names from United Nations list, the signing of security agreement between the US and Taliban, the opening of office in Qatar, in Doha, the release of 5,000 terrorists from the Afghan jails, they were all part of the deals and agreements between Taliban and the United States before seizure of power. Since August 15, 2021, Afghanistan is not only facing human rights catastrophe, but everything has completely collapsed. After the United States and NATO betrayed and handed over Afghanistan to Taliban, as expected, the so-called achievements of 20 years fall down within 20 minutes. Taliban Emirates announced a general amnesty to fool out the opposition. However, practically, they are killing, they are kidnapping, and they are threatening hundreds across the country. in addition of the punishments under Sharia law, such as stoning to death, ravaging, hanging in public, and all kinds of torture in barbarism is taking place, which of course is not exposed by the international media. The Taliban are trying to pretend to be changed in order to gain the global financial and diplomatic support. And of course, they want recognition and lifting of sanctions. But how someone can expect change from a medieval and alien mercenary group whose life is associated with the bloodshed, with suicide, and with different kind of violations? Today, the whole country has collapsed and it's in chaotic state. There's extreme hunger and highest rate of unemployment. Government offices, NGOs, schools, small and private, big companies and businesses are closed due to effect of the financial downfall. More than 95% of the population are food insecure, and 50% of the population are living under the line of poverty. Afghanistan experiencing over the past 4 decades has shown that Western powers in the regional countries involved in Afghan affairs are each willing to work with the biggest killers and abusers of Afghan people for their own interests. For them, the fate of the Afghan people and Afghan men and women has no value. It's more than a year now, Afghanistan has turned as a battleground for the goals of several different governments and intelligences. CIA continues supporting forces like Daesh, especially in the northern parts of our country. China and Russia are trying to make more deals with Taliban, and the neighboring intelligences, such as of Iranian and Pakistani regime, are working through their own favorite lackeys. As I said, most of the Western governments have tried to have relationship with Taliban regime, and the only condition they are bringing in the table is establishment of an exclusive government and reopening of the schools of the girls. And they are forgetting about the nature and mentality of Taliban. For the Western government, safeguarding their strategic goal is far more important, and they are willing to make any disgraceful deal with the barbaric Taliban and jihadist mafia. For example, when we see that the French government is backing Ahmad Massoud, who is the son of a famous fundamentalist warlord, Ahmad Shah Massoud, who only wanted to share power with Taliban. And now he wants to enjoy support, military and financial support from CIA. It's obvious that this so-called opposition and resistance, which is depending on the backing of US and CIA, would never get trust and support of our people. In the meanwhile, the female figures such as Fawzia Koofi, Shukriya Barakzai, Habiba Sorabi, Shahzad Akbar, and many others who are pretending to be anti-Taliban, but unfortunately, they are the showpieces of the Western media, and they are representing jihadi warlords. I would like to quote from the great revolutionary woman, Rosa Luxemburg, who says, "If it were a matter of the ladies of bourgeois, then the capitalist state could expect only a real prop of reaction from them." Most of the bourgeois women who play the loiness of the fight against male privilege would, once in possession of the suffrage, follow like meek little lambs in the wake of conservation and clerical reaction. Indeed, they would surely be far more reactionary than the masculine portion of their own classes. The people of Afghanistan have learned from the history, especially the last 20 years of the history, that justice, freedom, human rights, and secular democracy would not be gifted by any foreign power. These human values can be institutionalized in the society through the struggle and efforts of deprived and oppressed masses, in which case no force, no government will be threatening to take it back. The very courageous protest of women in Kabul and several other provinces of our country in the early days of Taliban takeover and their glorious resistance proved that these ignorant Taliban will never be able to hold Afghan women captive. Dear comrades, understanding the difficulties and the extreme dangerous path we have, and we promise to keep committed to the upcoming struggle against fundamentalism and against imperialism. Despite the gloomy and the suffocating atmosphere in our society, there is no way out for the current miserable situation to end. Expect the struggle for liberation and to sacrifice. Today, the real struggle and resistance are inside Afghanistan. The progressive and democratic forces need to be empowered so they can educate and mobilize the poorest and the most oppressed women in the remote parts of our country. The Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, RAWA, is the oldest anti-fundamentalist and women's rights organization that fights for independence, secular democracy, and social justice. RAWA was founded in 1977 by Marta Mina as a group to fight for the political rights of women. And from the very beginning, RAWA fearlessly has been in the forefront of exposing the injustice in our society. Apart from demonstrations and meetings, RAWA continues its underground and secret work in educating and mobilizing women and organizing them. Our literacy classes and home-based classes that are now run inside Afghanistan is a tool to empower women. Humanitarian projects such as food distribution, health, and other projects are the ways to build network to these women. We are honored to have contacts with different progressive movements and organizations, and I would like to mention especially that this year, Sakina Johnson's Award was given to RAWA. We believe that the friends of Afghan people are those who are standing against all criminal fundamentalists and with the Afghan people. We hope that the network of sympathy and solidarity will grow stronger. That's why we are in the glorious uprising of women in Iran. We are with them. We are inspired deeply by the fight of our Kurdish sister in Rojava. We swear by the blood of revolutionary martyred women from all parts of the world to continue their paths of struggle. RAWA would like to seek any opportunity to set the foundation of a great, practical, and effective unity. Simply because when the men kill, it's up to us women to fight for preservation of life. Yes, we are determined that women will weave the future by continuing the path of their martyred comrades. Women prove that they will write the history of revolution of this century. Women all around the world will chant the slogan of women, life, freedom, louder than ever. Jen, Jian, Azadi.
I'm sorry for another announcement, but the friends prepared something really good. There is the culture of bordado from Latin America, when especially women, they weaved, like stitched messages into fabrics, t-shirts for the political prisoners. So, but actually they were like stitching, but they stitched messages, like hidden messages for the political prisoners. I'm really fast, right? Okay, I'm sorry. And now, as you know, just before 1 or 2 weeks, there was a publishment that 17 of guerrilla fighters in the mountains of Kurdistan were murdered by chemical weapons. And a lot of them are also female combatants. And this is why the friends here, they prepared fabrics with their names, with the names of the female martyrs that fell from chemical weapons in the last 2 months in Kurdistan. And now we also want to do this bordado. We want to stitch. You can stitch anything you want. And it will be until the end of this conference, going on and on, these fabrics with the name of these martyrs. And you can write, you can stitch anything you want. You can make flowers, mountains, names. It's on you. It's upon your feelings and what you want to do. So thanks for this.
Well, what a lovely practice there. Thank you for making that announcement. Everyone, please do participate if you would like. So we're moving on to our second session after that wonderful intervention from Mariam. Once again, please do not publish any images of Mariam, but please do publicize her powerful words about women's struggle against imperialism, local reactionaries, fundamentalism, and patriarchy in Afghanistan. So now we move to the second dimension of this international war. The ecocide, the destruction of our natural environment, climate change carried out through the same powers of imperialism that wage war, by corporations expanding into new territory, destroying resources to maintain an unsustainable way of life, and destroying not only nature, but communities as well. So here to speak about different women's ecological struggles against this, we have our first speaker, Lolita Chavez from Feministas Abayala in Guatemala.
Te subes y me lo subes. Chacrico no hel, quien ya junrichili chichihue, malteosh, chihue, quitanutzig. Voy a traducir porque si no hablo quiche. Decía que les doy un saludo y vamos a tratar de encender nuestro fuego. Este fuego es un fuego que encendemos a nuestras ancestras que caminan con su memoria, su historia, su vientre y su sangre. Gracias una vez por nuestra vida que celebramos aquí y ahora. Gracias 2 veces por la Madre Tierra que sostiene nuestra vida. Y gracias 3 veces por el cosmos que sostiene la Tierra que sostiene nuestra vida. Ese es nuestro fuego feminista
Feminist
de Abya Yala
from Abya Yala to Kurdistan.
Venimos con toda nuestra energía
We ask with all our energy as indigenous population today will join together to the call not to the war, not to use weapons or chemical weapons in the Kurdistan.
es nuestra posición,
That is our position.
nuestro posicionamiento. Malteos Chihue, gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias porque venimos
Thank you because we come
donde
from places where we defend life
no solo de la humanidad,
and not only from
en la
humanity, also life in the network,
expresión
life of
plural y diversa.
every single plural
Abya Yala,
expression. That is what we are in Abya Yala.
de la tierra.
That is what we defend, because we are the daughters
Mama.
of the Pachamama, the daughters of the earth.
Venimos de nuestra gran
Today we come from Abya Yala.
por los
We has been
patria,
called by the patriarchal invaders America. We are no America.
3 veces.
We are gonna say it 3 times.
Hoy
Today,
les decimos que somos
we tell you that we are the result
tejidos
of
interconectados,
the connecting network
raíces,
from
las raíces de vida,
that life,
es
those
nuestra
roots of life. That is our frequency. We come from the earth,
tornamos a la
and we will be back to it. We are
las expresiones
the expressions
antipatriarcales,
of we are
antiimperialistas,
anti-imperialist, anti-patriarchal, anti-colonial expressions, anti-neoliberal, anti-racist expressions. That's what we are, and we tell you quite happy about it.
no somos los invasores,
We're not the invaders.
somos quienes hemos tejido
We are the ones weaving life in the territories that are being invaded, and not by women,
con estructuras
but
sanguinarias
by structures
que generan
of terror
criminales.
that create
Esas redes,
criminal networks. But
esas redes
these networks are not alone. They are funded by
por el
the
BCE,
Global Bank,
y por Europa,
the BCE,
y se
and by Europe.
aquí,
And we're saying it here in Europe.
son parte
You are also part of that network of criminals
nuestros territorios,
that are invading our territories.
mirándoles a los ojos.
We're saying it here now to your eyes. We cannot continue like this.
El plan de exterminio continúa.
The genocidal plan continues.
3 veces
We're saying it once, twice, 3 times that we don't want these territories invaded by the international companies,
no se ha puesto caso a nuestro llamado.
but nobody's paying attention to that.
Estado gritando
We've been
haciendo
shouting,
de la madre tierra, de la biodiversidad,
we've been voicing out
de lo cansado
of biodiversity, of Mother Nature, because she's tired, the earth is tired,
escuchar.
but nobody's paying attention.
Los patriarcados no son
Patriarchies are not only outside, they are also
con tristeza y con llanto
with sadness.
que esos
We announce that these patriarchies are also in our process, in our organizations, in our territories, in our communities. You should be
que también están ahí.
The sexists should be ashamed that are also there,
Es doble moral.
the ones that are also defending the territory. That's double morals. Yeah.
Las mujeres y las
Women
expresiones
and expressions of dissidents have been resisting, have been defending the territory,
defender nuestras vidas.
like our lives.
Declararon la guerra.
They declared war on us, the extractive companies.
Que tenemos
Why? Because we have different
tenemos
life models.
mundos
We have other worlds that are possible.
en esos
They are happening
estamos
in those territories that we are weaving.
se está tejiendo.
It's being,
Aviala,
we are weaving it in Abiyala, the buen vivir.
es el buen
Utilah Kasemal is the buen vivir for everybody,
la humanidad. Por
not only for humanity.
hay
We embrace
genealogy.
genealogy.
Es que abrazamos a genealogy.
That's why we embrace it.
Mucho.
We are very similar.
Hoy seguimos
Today,
diciendo, la
we denounce again militarization of our territories.
dicen
There are more weapons.
democracia,
They say there is democracy. That's false because there are more weapons in the territories. Every day, they rise in these territories. Those weapons, they don't rest.
están llegando
Those weapons
Ayala,
reach Abiyala to kill us,
que dicen varios
even though they say
que son progresistas
that they are progressive,
a favor del
but they are in favor of extractivism.
nuestras
If they are against our lives.
nosotras estamos poniendo el cuerpo
We are putting our bodies,
mapuches,
like
quien
Mapuche sisters.
pedimos la
uh,
libertad de las
We
laminas
ask
en
them,
el territorio mapuche,
we ask
un territorio
the liberation of the Lamil, of the territory, the Mapuche territory.
tenemos un posicionamiento
We have a position.
a las machis por luchar, libertad, libertad,
Freedom
a las machis por luchar,
to the Machis for fighting.
a las machis por luchar.
Freedom
Tenemos
to them for
un
fighting.
posicionamiento
We have this position,
plurinacional.
a plurinational position. We break borders from Abiyala to Kurdistan. We denounce the coup d'etat, like what happened in Bolivia. Also, our sisters there
Contra el golpe de
are
Estado.
fighting
Por eso decimos, ni
against the coup d'etat.
ni golpes de Estado,
No
ni golpe a
to
las
the coup
mujeres.
d'etat
Ese es
to the state and no to the coup d'etat to the women. That's our position, and we're not alone. Alone, never again.
nuestra revolución está ahí.
Our revolution is there, is inside, with
Profundo
that
de la
compromise
despatriarcación
of
y la descolonización.
the depatriarchization from our being. We generate community.
Vamos a-
That is why.
en el 35 encuentro plurinacional
That is why we
entre
just had the 35th meeting
y Raquel Frankel.
with that name.
Más despacio. Así que eso somos.
That's what we are.
Estos territorios
We come from those territories,
queremos
but we also want
denunciando
to denounce
justicia
and ask for justice,
no nos
because we don't forgive,
esos
we don't reconcile with the feminists
quemaron a
in
56 niñas
The ban
del
56
Guatemala, un
6
8 de marzo
girls
del 2010.
Guatemala in
Esa situación
2017. The situation
en la impunidad.
is in the impunity. So we demand justice
Guatemala.
for the little girls in Guatemala.
No fue el fuego, fue
It
el
wasn't the fire, was the state, the feminist state.
Las feministas de Aviala
The feminists in Aviala,
estamos tejiendo
we are building the network for autonomy. We build predetermination, but also we build wisdom here and now. Today we say we are not ashamed that they say we are witches, because our spirituality is very present, and we are against the fundamentalisms, because in this body, in this land, we say we decide ourselves. That's why. That's why we are here. And with all our heart, with our strength and our blood, all joined to the blood of the Mother Earth, we keep calling we call in the voice of Berta Cáceres that said there is no time. And that's what we ask. Let's join together and create those networks, those feminist networks. I am a feminist. I am a communist feminist, and those feminism join together. A communitarian feminist, sorry, with the sacred expression of our food. Let's grow our food. Don't eat that food from the transnational, because that's death and destruction in our being. That's what we ask to you. That expression, we still take it to the new generations, because we are here not for another generation. It's because of the generations in the future. Plural and diverse generation. That's what we come here to say from Abya Yala. That's why in other places we tell you that from the origins, please stop the international business, because from Abya Yala we're gonna still stop them. There is no doubt about that. All the business that are extracting hydroelectric, monocultive, the fracking, and everything that's gonna come, even given a fake answer to the global warming, that in Abya Yala we're gonna stop them. So if they arrive, they are declaring the war to us.
Those are millennial wisdoms that are being woven from every corner in Abya Yala, the deep corners. That's what we have been weaving. But the militarization is really strong in the borders, because the borders are criminalizing human mobility. I had to walk because I've been criminalized. I've been tortured. I've been put in trial. They tried to kill me, but I'm here. I'm alive. And I have power. That is why. That's what we say. Feminists in Abya Yala, they fear us because we don't fear them. And in the whole Abya Yala, whole Abya Yala is going to be feminist for the revolution, for the territory revolution, for the liberation of the territories against extractivism, for a life model respectful with humanity and all expressions of life. I embrace you all, and to all expressions, anti-extractivism, the force of water, of fire, of the earth, of the air, from there is going to come to your territories. 3 times thank you.
Plurinacional desde Abya Yala.
Plurinational from Abya Yala to Kurdistan. Plurinational. From Abya Yala to Kurdistan. Thank you.
And what a powerful reminder that our struggle for an ecological world cannot be separated from the struggle of all peoples for freedom from colonialism, for self-determination in whatever form they seek, and for the freedom of women. Thank you so much, Lolita, for that beautiful presentation. And next, speaking on this same theme, moving to this topic of how we understand ecocide, the destruction of the environment, the destruction of indigenous peoples, and how we move towards a way out of such a deadly and devastating system that targets all forms of life. Our next speaker will be Ariel Sarle, a sociologist and ecofeminist from Australia. Thank you.
Hi, is this switched on? Is this working? Yeah? Okay. Well, they say that the politics of Rojava is eco-feminist, and I think it's true. Ecofeminism is a politics that treats feminism and ecology as entangled struggles. And we have some slides. Are you going to do it? Ecofeminism emerges.
When you speak, it's important that this is right, because for the translators, that otherwise they can't. You can just press down here to go.
Which one do I press?
Just down here.
That's what? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we begin again. I forgot which button you said it was. Which button is it? Yeah, which button is it?
It's the arrow that goes down, or
which one? This one?
Yeah, this
yes, that's easy, easy.
Can I put this down a little bit?
Okay, yes. Yeah, thank you. So ecofeminism is a politics that treats feminism and ecology as entangled struggles. It emerges around the world whenever conditions of life in urban neighborhoods or rural communities are at risk from militarism or capitalist development. I recall the very moment I turned into an activist, actually, 50 years ago now. 1970. I was a beginner teacher and a young single mother of 2 girls. Living in one room, a letter in my hand from the Australian Income Tax Department was refusing to deduct childcare fees from my earned income as a teacher. It was, according to the government, unnecessary personal expenditure. I saw red. And as a class exercise, I had my students design a flyer on the hypocrisy of Mother's Day, and give it out at the main bus terminus in Hobart. I lobbied the taxpayers department from a street-based coin phone. I went on TV pointing out the insanity of giving men routine tax deductions for business lunches or new cars and the like. Of course, this is trivial compared with the anguish and suffering of Kurdish women's struggles. But at least I was now a feminist. Slower? Slower? Although I'd come to earn my living as a university teacher, my main work was always been activism. I'm sorry, what's happening? First of all, I just tackled everyday issues as they came up, and this meant helping community groups here and there. But soon I encountered the social movement politics and came to realize that what was really needed was a common framework for them. Eventually, I came to focus on how the struggle for life on Earth is at once socialist, decolonial, feminist, and ecological, 4 revolutions in one. And since that time, I've spent my life trying to theorize that entanglement. However, the most fundamental of these politics is feminism. Masculine domination is historical, but it also deeply rooted in the embodied materiality of women and men. How did this come to be? Humans are themselves nature in embodied form, and they're born across a range of sexualities. There's not just men or women. But a refusal to identify with nature is what leads to patriarchal thinking. From the ancient Abrahamic religious traditions onwards to the 21st century transhumanism. The globally dominant assumption is that men equal humanity, while women equal nature. This masculinist ideology rests on a form of dissociated thinking that structures the world into false dualisms. Slower. By defining one side as valued and the other as not valued, the colonialism and resourcing of nature. What is it? So you see on the slide the product of a dissociated mindset, which divides the world into humanity versus nature, man versus woman, production versus reproduction, physics versus biology, economy versus ecology, capital. You can see the rest. We live everyday life in this straitjacket, and it imprisons us. It poisons our thinking and our politics. And it facilitates, it helps, makes possible the colonization and resourcing of those on the unvalued side. The control of women is seen in practices of child marriage, polygamy, honor killing, domestic violence, abduction, rape, illegal abortion, shaming, and public discrimination. The great 1700s English scientific revolution was only achieved after millions of women, midwives, and healers had been executed by state-sponsored witch hunts. In the 20th century, feminist psychoanalysts of the object relations school diagnosed the source of this split thinking in the process by which a boy's self-identity or ego starts to form in separation from the maternal body. As a result, domination and oppression are projected outwards in institutional form. And here we see, if you like, an X-ray of the global system, starting with, originally gods and kings at the top, and now presidents, but moving through the capitalist class and then through the workers, all of which is masculine dominated, the productive sphere. And the black line represents the line of dissociation in the mind, the splitting in the masculine mind at the base of masculinist ideology and hegemony. And below the line is all that's unvalued: nature, chaos, the reproductive world, which is carried out by peasants and indigenous peoples, mothers. It affects youth, children, animals, plants, all unvalued. And we see at the bottom, the two arrows are treated as responsibilities are carried in the sphere of reproduction, and the sphere of reproduction is resourced for free. And above, we see power is exerted down and rights are enjoyed by those at the top of the institutional hierarchy. Domination and oppression stem from the continual need to protect, of men's continual need to protect and recharge these masculine ego boundaries. The primal act of matricide is repressed and denied by being projected outwards onto the world. Collectively among men, it is sublimated historically and hardened in the formation of powerful institutions, as we see here, from religions to nation states, to capitalist economies, to positivist science and technology. The domination of men over women was the original model for colonization and for class society. And as Ödlund says in his prison writings, 5,000 years of history make it all too clear that whenever people were affected by some kind of inequality, discrimination, or oppression, women were affected most. In the early phases of class society, children were often sacrificed by men to the gods. Modern sacrifices in the age of capitalism take place on the altar of money. So as a result of this division of the world into classes and layers, we have what I call the debt matrix. So each level, there is an extraction. If you look at the social movements who represent the concerns of workers, there is a social debt because they're not paid for the amount of work time they're put in. If you look at peasant peoples and indigenous peoples, post-colonial movements, there is a post-colonial debt because of the stealing, the theft of livelihood. If you look at women, women carry an embodied debt because of the reproductive labors they do, everything from birthing through to moral teaching, protecting the next generation. Ooh, sorry. And sorry. There are children, there is also an intergenerational debt, in as much as the system that we have now keeps the costs, keeps the benefits from production, but projects the costs forward and onto future generations. And we see this, of course, with climate change. And then there is a debt to the ecosystem at large. Several decades after my feminist wake-up call, I learned about the medical impacts of radiation from nuclear technology. The British had already tested atomic weapons and hydrogen bombs on Australian Indigenous lands. Now, multinational corporations were about to mine uranium in our Northern Territory. So as feminists, ecological feminists, we formed a movement against uranium mining with trade unions, environmentalists, Indigenous communities. We got the industry stopped, but they were later betrayed by the Labor Party, socialist actually. Once they were in government, they rolled back the moratorium we'd achieved. Patriarchal colonial capitalist economics is based on the violent dispossession of peoples from their lands and livelihoods, resource extractivism, and the appropriation of life energies on a planetary scale. Theft by transnational ruling class leaves behind a matrix of debt, which I just mentioned, and it is much more than economic. These debts are thermodynamic. That is, they zap the life energy of nature and human bodies themselves. So what does patriarchal masculinity achieve? Look at the blank, confused faces of these patriarchal decision makers. Not content with dividing up and controlling the earth, they still gain no satisfaction at all. This is because their worldview is based on the emptiness of psychological dissociation. Maintaining the masculine ego calls for constant effort inside the self. It takes energy. War and power over others is a projection of this internal conflict. Toxic masculinity expresses an alienation from life itself, a continuing disorientation that all the power struggles and victories in the world can never heal. In 1981, the US Women's Pentagon Action Encirclement was organized by Nestra King. And in the same year, the Greenham Common women protested missile bases in Britain. And these were really formative eco-feminist movements. That is 40 years ago now. But such protest failed, ultimately failed, because they rested on a political reason which was masculinist, which, as we know today, scarcely penetrates the pre-conscious cause of patriarchal aggression. Bedland knows this, which is why he urges that only the liberation of women will necessarily be followed by general liberation, enlightenment and justice. Only this will contribute to peace, which is more valuable than war. Yet another world is possible. This is a shot taken during the Australian bushfires. And the little animal is a famous koala bear, which everybody loves. And the fireman, the fire brigade guy, is nurturing him even holding his hand while he feeds him water. It can be done. We can achieve this change. The global crisis of modernity is a crisis of masculinity. But today's single issue efforts for change often perpetuate mainstream culture, whether in right-wing corporate ethics, liberal UN sustainability policy, or even left eco-socialism. Sex gender is missing, sex gender literacy is missing. With economic development and modernization, so-called, Eurocentric masculinism may be even reinforce unfair pre-colonial sex gender patterns. Meanwhile, some feminist movements, liberal, socialist, postmodern and transhuman, lack the integrative analysis of ecological feminisms or the integrative analysis of Indigenous womanist positions. To look at a very important early feminist theorist of reproduction, we have Hilkka Pietila of Finland. I'm sorry, I'm going to finish. She identifies the free or domestic economy in the center of the circle and shows the protected sector or the state, and outside that, the transnational corporate sector as parasitic, totally dependent on the activities of women in the reproductive sector. Another important eco-feminist was Mary Mellor, who was a British thinker and activist in the cooperative movement, who diagnosed how the separation of the economy into productive sphere versus reproductive sphere, or what she called the me, high-value economy of economic man, we're familiar with it, its characteristics, versus the low-value work that women do for life on Earth. And note that the ecosystem itself, nature itself, is an economy in a sense, which is providing for us, for our embodied needs. A really critical ecofeminist was Vandana Shiva, the Indian former quantum physicist. But once she became a mother, she revised her career plans and began looking at how Indigenous women in India manage ecological cycles. And you can see this integrative skilling yourselves. And of course, they achieve food sovereignty with an ecological sustainability. My own work, and I'm nearly finished, this is a picture of from a time in my life when I had married into a Southeast Asian rice-growing community, and this is my idea of paradise, but it's perhaps where we might ultimately be able to recreate something like that. In my work, I have distilled what I see as principles from the work of Indigenous gatherers, peasant farmers, and mothering nurture, which respect life and enable the reproduction of life without damage. And I call this an episteme, or a people's science, but it's also an ecological ethic. And there are further aspects to it which point to how we might reorganize society in more humane and nurturant ways. So finally, to look at a wonderful example which parallels perhaps what the Rojava women are doing in some places. This is Ecuador, and these are the women of the valley of Narbonne, which was a mountainous area. totally ravaged by mining in the development period of the country, and restored by the women. The men had gone to the cities under development, as is the way, and they've restored the water catchments and flows. They've restored the biodiversity and the animal life, and they've even done their bit for climate, because restoring the biodiversity allows the atmospheric balance and processing of carbon, which is and the lady, the picture I just showed you was the lady who had led that movement of women in doing this. And finally, to mention the very famous subsistence perspective from the German eco-feminists Maria Mies and Veronica Ben-Hold-Thompson. And you can see there what they recommend. And again, I think the overlap with the ecofeminism in Rojava is very clear. So I want to close just by saying how impressed I am by the genealogy's consciousness-raising workshops on masculinist domination. It's absolutely essential to get to the root cause, the dissociation at the basis of this, and to help men to grasp and acknowledge this problem that they have, which they end up projecting out onto the world at large. So I think, just to say in finishing, ecocide and femicide do have a common root in that. And change means unraveling the old knots and reweaving women and men together in a new way. And for that, we have the promise of new life. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective and that framework with which we can look at these ecological issues. And that provides a very beneficial tie into our third and final topic of this session, making invisible labor visible, and how the survival of the system that exists and that is behind all of these crises that we have heard about today is based on women's unpaid and low-paid labor. So in this discussion of how class struggle and struggle against capitalist exploitation can also be based on women's struggle to reclaim and to fulfill a role in society wherein they're no longer deprived of any compensation for the work that they do to sustain society. We're going to hear first from Genevieve Vaughn, a peace activist, feminist, and philanthropist from the USA and Italy, will be our first speaker on this topic. Thank you, Genevieve.
How do yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here, and I embrace you all. The title of this session, Making Invisible Labor Visible, contains a radical implication. Because we don't see the enormous contribution of women's unpaid and low-paid labor, we don't understand the system of which we are a part, and we support it in spite of ourselves, even though it is harming us. Since the patriarchal capitalist system has now reached a time of almost terminal crisis, it would be extremely important to stop supporting it and transition to a better way of life for everyone. I believe that in order to see what this invisible work is, we have to radically change our perspective away from what European American economists tell us. We have to take free work as the standard and paid work in the market itself, as an aberration. In fact, we don't want the system to survive. We want the planet and our species and all the other species to survive. What? The fact is that women are nurturing a parasitic system with our free gift work. In order to nurture other people and ourselves, to sustain life, we are functioning as the host to a large-scale economic parasite that is altering and destroying life. In order to really see this, we have to find a starting point that is radically different from that of the market. We need to look at the unpaid work of women, the work of provisioning, care, and social reproduction as the basis of another economic mode, a free gift economy that has to exist in the maternal care of the child at the beginning of every human life, and has existed since the beginning of our species. This is because, differently from most other species, human children are not capable of fending for themselves for several years after birth. Also, they are not Also, they are not capable of owning anything, and they do not know how to give anything in exchange for what they receive. Therefore, in order to survive, they require unilateral care by someone, usually birth mothers who have the milk to give to them, but also often other motherers, grandmothers, fathers, other family members, and even whole villages give unilaterally to satisfy children's needs. I use the term motherer rather than mother to indicate the person or persons who provide unilateral care to the child. Family researcher Darshan Narvaez talks about the 99% of human history in which children lived in nurturing communities, and how now in capitalism with the nuclear family, birth mothers are often isolated without a community of other gift providers, and they have to perform all of the community functions themselves or pay someone else to do it. In spite of the difficulties, even in patriarchal capitalism, it is in the context of unilateral giving and receiving that children spend their first years because their survival requires it. They do not understand quid pro quo exchange until around 3 years of age. And after that, it takes several more years until they finally grasp how the market works. So even if someone is being paid to take care of them, they do not know it. And for them, the care they receive is gifted. As adults, we usually look at the economy as based on exchange, giving in order to receive. But free is also a mode of production and distribution, which is even more widely spread than the market. All children emerge from the free economy of the womb into the free maternal economy. They learn to receive and give unilaterally within it, beginning with their first inhalation and exhalation of breath. In cultures without markets, children never have to adapt to the quid pro quo exchange logic. The values that underlie the social fabric are different from those of the market. And irrespective of gender, adults in those societies can all maintain an overt continuity with the values contained in the maternal model of free and appropriate other-oriented gifting. Mother care requires a detailed attention to children's needs and the willingness and ability to satisfy them in life-affirming ways. This other-oriented model is available to all children who survive, and many of our human capacities are laid down in this period in correspondence with it. However, in capitalist academia, the possibility of this maternal origin of our species' specific abilities, such as human communication and community, language, even reason and tool-making, has been lost through the patriarchal market-based thinking. Misogyny kept women out of academia for centuries, and since men were not doing mothering, they did not understand or even reference the gift economy. This blind spot has made them invent systems of explanations of the world without the basic giving and receiving pattern and framework for thought and human relations that is provided by the maternal economy to both males and female children. Many of these abstract explanations for our capacities that have been invented by patriarchal thinkers. Many of these abstract explanations divide and conquer gifting by relegating care of the other into separate moral or ethical or religious categories, while making giving care a matter of personal choice and perhaps exceptional or saintly behavior, rather than what it really is, the normal, everyday human interactive paradigm. Explanations having to do with the greedy and adversarial nature of man, barely held in check by his ability to reason, justify the predatory behavior of men and nations, and leave out the maternal origin of both male and female individuals and of the species itself. They also leave out the continuity with nature, which functions for us according to the gift principle, in that we are adapted and adapt ourselves to receiving the gifts of our ecological niches, from the air we breathe in that animates us, from the air we breathe in that animates us, and when we breathe it out, nurtures the plants, to the light we receive that warms us and reflects to us the many colors of our surroundings, to the bodies, actions, smells, and sounds of our environment. How much left under here? From the air we breathe in that animates us, and when we breathe it out, nurtures the plants, to the light we receive that warms us and reflects to us the many colors of our surroundings, to the bodies, actions, smells, and sounds of our environments, we give and receive in Gaia's maternal sea of gifts. If we can step outside the exchange paradigm that excludes and plunders gifts and quantifies everything, we can acknowledge and gratefully receive and give those gifts again, consciously ourselves. Then our hearts that send our blood in circulation to carry oxygen to our cells at another level motivate us to move forwards, giving to other people and traveling to other destinations. The gift paradigm makes it possible for us to recognize our continuity with nature, while the exchange paradigm separates us from nature, which then appears only as a collection of objects with the potential of being exchanged. Unfortunately, in our present system, the exploitative and gift-plundering character of the market economy creates scarcity and makes gift-giving difficult and often self-sacrificial, which discredits free giving, even in the eyes of the givers themselves. This is not the fault of the gift economy, but of the context in which it is forced to exist, where most of the means of production of gifts are inaccessible because they are privately owned. The division of labor that relegates child care to women only does not allow males to replay their own early childhood in the role of motherer, nor does the child's confirmation of mother care by her response to it reach the father directly, as it does in the female maternal carer. Thus, in our society, men's potential other-oriented practice as individual is not confirmed as normal by experience as much as women's. It can appear eccentric and can be discredited by society, beginning in childhood, discrediting of sissies and mama's boys. This is in our patriarchal capitalist society. An imitation, or we may say aberration, of maternal gifting, hitting, which traverses the interpersonal space, hitting, which traverses the interpersonal space and touches the other, like the gift, but establishes domination, not mutuality, becomes the alternative to nurture for a mother-denying masculinity. The domination of the mother and of her economy seems to be the appropriate role for the patriarchal male. Success in this venture appears to be the top-down position in chains of domination, in which those below, whether male or female, are made to nurture, to give to those above. All this creates the social context of patriarchy, which, when merged with the market and money, creates the system of patriarchal capitalism. This is a system in which the maternal gift economy persists unseen as the host of the market parasite, the source of the gifts of profit that motivate the whole interaction and the social nexus. We can see all this briefly when we reveal and count women's free labor in the home as gift labor of social reproduction that passes through the workers she has nurtured, including herself when she is a worker, and reappears as part of a surplus labor, surplus value that forms the profit of the capitalist. This labor is free to the capitalist and thus is a gift to him or her by the worker, who does not see it as such because she or he works for the going wage. Under the appearance of equal exchange, the market funnels gifts away from the many and towards the few, who use the accumulated capital to invest again to channel more gifts of profit upwards towards themselves. When too many gifts accumulate at the top, ways of wasting them or redistributing them to other capitalist enterprises are invented, such as investing in wars and armaments that destroy infrastructures and create the scarcity necessary for the market to function, according to the motto that it
Very sorry for the interruption, everybody. 1 second. Perhaps if you sit here, I think we should switch off this one here. Take it.
Okay. 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 For decades, feminist economists have been trying to calculate the money value of women's unpaid labor. Can you hear? The highest value I have seen given to women's unpaid labor was by Ironmonger and Supurmas, who, using time use criteria, estimated the USA's 2011 global gross household product as $11.6 trillion and the gross domestic product as $13.3 trillion. So they did it almost the same. And the also, there's the global ecosystem services, which the economists call it as, is some $125 trillion a year as compared to the monetized economies of 75 trillion. The point is now to reveal the maternal gift economy and recognize that it already exists in as the authentic human economy beneath the artificial constructions of patriarchal capitalism that dominate and take from it by structurally similar forms of oppression like racism, classism, and colonialism. And we need to begin to redefine ourselves as the human species, as Homo donans, the giving being, rather than Homo sapiens, the supposedly knowing being, because we don't know who we are, and certainly not Homo economicus, the economic being.
Thank you very much for that brilliant intervention and that explanation of another economic model in which the labor that women does could be valued. Take the mic. Okay. Better? All right. Okay, and our final speaker, also speaking on this topic of economic exploitation and making invisible labor visible, is Kavita Krishnan, a feminist activist with the All India Progressive Women's Association. Formerly with the All India Progressive Women's Association.
Hello, it's on. Thank you. Yeah, I thank you so much to the wonderful organizers of the Network of Women Weaving the Future. And it's absolutely wonderful to be here and to raise the slogans of Jinjian Azadi, which resonate with me in more ways than one, because I come from India. And many, Azadi means freedom in many, many Indian languages. And the fact that that word, that slogan, it just drives home how much we are, people of the world could be one. And we share that urge for freedom, for azadi. And it's quite simple to support that for all the peoples of the world. So I want to begin by using the Indian words which are drawn from Persian to support the various struggles which are ongoing in this world, especially those led by women. So it's Zindabad and Salam to the Kurdish women fighting so bravely against the ISIS, with the Rojava movement. India's Muslim women who are fighting right at the forefront against a Hindu supremacist fascist regime. Kashmiri women, the people and the women of Ukraine and Yemen and Palestine, Iranian women who are inspiring us all today, Russian feminists who are speaking up against a fascist and imperialist regime, the women of color of the United States of America and the feminists of the United States of America who are also fighting against far-right and imperialist policies and capitalism. The women of all the Latin American nations who are, many of whom are with us today, what courageous struggles they are fighting against in country after country, again, demanding and winning the right for abortion, demanding an end to the violence against women, and then the women and the people's resistance in Syria, and the Uyghur people of China. So workers, all women workers all over the world who are fighting and suffering. So absolutely, Zindabad, Salam to all of them. I want to start with a little news today, which some of you may or may not have seen. The workers in China's, in a Chinese province who, I have in my hand an iPhone, who produce the iPhone. They are 20,000 workers, 90% of whom are women. They are trying to escape from a locked factory in China, where they are being forced to make these phones and remain on the assembly line when there is a massive COVID outbreak in the factory. The government does not, which is saying zero COVID, is keeping them captive on two pretexts. One pretext is that if they get out, they will spread COVID, and zero COVID policy means we're going to keep you inside. And they are threatening workers that we will feed you only if you keep working, or else you starve. And they're keeping the factory locked. And the other reason, of course, for keeping it locked is that they are forcing these workers to keep producing this. Even if they are sick, even if they are hungry, they have to keep in there. That's slave labor. But the reason why, she mentioned the organization to which I belonged for 30 years. I belonged to the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, for 30 years. And just 2 months back, I don't belong there anymore. And one of the reasons is the inability to call a spade when it comes to China, socialist. No, we don't want to look that way. Even, and we don't want to do any actionable, active solidarity for the Uyghurs, for the Syrians, for the Ukrainians, and so on. Anybody, every solidarity for a people's movement is weighed by this notion that multipolarity is a good thing. And so anybody who's opposed to the US, no matter if that regime is fascist, and people are protesting against that regime, Iran, Ukraine, China, anybody. So the idea is that irrespective of whether or not a regime is democratic, if it's anti-US, we're kind of going to be a little soft on it, or we're going to be outright cheerleaders for it, which is also. So this problem is why I think that the inability for wholehearted support for these movements in Iran and in so many other places, the inability to advocate for these people and these movements and these women is one of the reasons why I lost my political home of 30 years. So, in which I was in the top leadership, but that didn't matter. So what's happening in China, and the fact that 90% of these workers are women, yes, slow. The fact that 90% of these workers are women is no coincidence. And in fact, there are many similarities between how regimes and multinational companies work together to create a docile women's workforce in China, in India, in Bangladesh. I'm sure elsewhere as well. But these are three instances that I've studied a bit, and I know India, of course, I've closely followed. I mean, I've been a part of those movements. So how does it work? The idea is that a relationship, which is supposedly replicating the institution of the patriarchal family in the workplace. This is the model. Let me give you some examples. So in India, women workers who produce for all kinds of global garment chains, clothing chains, they are very young women, and they are recruited by telling their parents that they're going to work here for 3 years. At the end of the 3 years, they'll get a lump sum payment, as in a payment at one go. And don't worry, we'll keep your daughter safe. But here's where the problem lies. Because safety in India, in South Asia, is a code word, which means, if you translate the word properly, its meaning properly, it means a denial of freedom, an attack on women's freedom. So we'll keep you safe means we'll lock you up. So for your own good, who are you keeping me safe from? I'm keeping you safe from your own choices, your own autonomy. And you see, they're drawing on a larger culture in India, which comes from the caste system, where families don't like their daughters to marry outside the caste or the community. And caste in India has leaked from the Hindu majority faith into Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, you name it. So this means that parents will say, we want you safe. But in the name of safety, what they mean is, don't go out and fall in love or live your own life as you like. a small instance of this. Many of you may have heard that, oh, India has a big rape problem. I will tell you this, that yes, rape, sexual violence, these are big problems in India and all across the world. There's nothing special or unique to that problem in India. The problem that is unique to India and, well, countries with a similar background like India is this control over women's lives. And what does this control? Let me give you an example which comes from rape statistics. To look for this, this reality, you have to look at rape statistics to see this violence against women's freedom that hides in plain sight. So there's a women journalist who's done this study of rape cases that reached the courts, that went for trial. And she found that 40% of rape cases, rape allegations that made it to courts in India were false. Why do I say they are false? I can see your faces saying, she said they're false. How does she know? I know because these were all cases in which the supposed victim, the girl or the woman, said loud and clear that she was not raped, that she loved this man and she was running away from her violent parents in order to marry this person or whatever. So, yeah. So, so this is the situation of violence against women, that this violence against freedom is what is, masquerading in plain sight. And it is what is leveraged by the multinationals. It's leveraged by the multinational companies and those who produce for them to basically reproduce the same things and say, women workers in our factories can't use mobile phones. They can't be allowed to go out, go for a movie, go for a walk together. No, you will be basically imprisoned. And the pretext is safety. You can't, the pretext is that if you have a mobile phone, you'll communicate with your boyfriend or girlfriend. But if you have a mobile phone, of course, you will use it to organize, to unionize, and they have it both ways. I give you this example to remind you that, these forms of violence are not just cultural, they are material, they serve the whole system. And therefore, you find a very similar situation in China, in Bangladesh. So China, Bangladesh, India, all three places, the managers of these factories say, we are like fathers. These are our daughters. And therefore, we know that, they are innocent girls. And so we have to keep them safe because their choices may endanger them, their freedom. We have to protect them from their own freedom. So in India, there was a remarkable movement recently, which I'll very briefly mention, which, pay my tribute to it, which was a movement led by Muslim women against the government we have now, which is a Hindu supremacist government, led by Narendra Modi, who is a openly fascist leader. And this was a movement which against a law which is designed to strip Muslims of citizenship. Muslim women led that movement. So the last thing I want to say, because I have very little time left, I want to say here that I kind of disagree with the premise, that one of the initial people who introduced this, I think it was Niloufar, who placed this, that basically, okay, a war in Ukraine, say, is basically a fight between two men, or that it is, multipolarity that we need. I want you to know and pay attention to this, that Putin, Meloni, Modi, Xi Jinping, and several other leaders, they use the language of multipolarity to say that the Western countries have double standards on democracy, and so there should be no standards of democracy and human rights. You let us, each pole should be allowed to do what it likes. And who are the poles? Certain big powers, global and regional big powers. And I'll just say that one of the things which they do, which should concern us as feminists, this is just my last two-bit, is that the language they use sounds anti-imperialist, it's multipolarity, it's anti-colonial, decolonial. But when you listen carefully, what do they mean by that? They mean that feminist movements, LGBT movements, they mean that movements for equality of any kind, these are Western values. They can't be universalized. And so in the name of culture, in the name of uniqueness, basically we are allowed to lock up our minorities. We are allowed to lock up our dissidents. We are allowed to be homophobic and transphobic. This is the language they are all speaking. We need to start listening to that, recognizing it, and then we can stand. Our job is simple. We just have to stand in solidarity with all the movements that are fighting for democracy. It doesn't mean we are supporting a Biden or whatever. We are supporting the people who are fighting and their right to self-defense and survival. And absolutely everywhere. And they have a right to get help from wherever they like. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. And that closes out this main portion of our panel. And now we're here for what I'm sure many of you have been waiting for after hearing these brilliant interventions by all of these women. We will be taking questions from the audience. In the interest of time, please direct your question to a specific speaker if this is possible. I will take 3 at first, and if we can get through those first 3, then we may do another round. I believe there are microphones that will be given out so that everybody can hear your question. Anyone? Don't make me randomly call on people. Yes, right there in green. You can stand up and someone will bring a microphone to you.
Like this.
Hi, my name is Naya, and I'm with the Feminist Assembly of Latin Americans from London, UK. My question is to Ariel Saleh. And it has to do, I really like your presentation in how you expose the binary narrative of the global. So my question is, why do we need to replace an ideology with another ideology when it's supposed to be the concentration of ideas in different places that divide us?
I couldn't Hello? Is it here? You working? I couldn't actually hear your question. Could you please say it very slowly to me? Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear? Is better now?
Yes, but speak slowly. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
At the moment, ideologies are the ones that run the world, and obviously patriarchal ideologies.
Much better if she wrote the question down on a piece of paper, and then we can read it. I cannot actually hear that.
Hold on 1 second. Very sorry for the interruption. All right, so we will get to that question. Someone is coming to you. In the meantime, we'll take our next question. And please, before you ask your question, please state what language you will be asking your question in, just so that our translators can adjust accordingly. Thank you. Anyone? Yes. Hello, with your hand raised in the back.
I will be asking my question in English. My name is Catherine. I'm from the Women's Front of Norway, and I want to thank you all for very interesting introductions. My question is for Nilofer Koç. I wanted to ask you what your analysis of the situation in Iran is right now, and what do you think the future will bring for the women of Iran? Thank you.
Well, I think the question on Iran depends of the decision of the political actors, particularly the women's movement in Iran. Right now, there's a talk in between, is there a need of system change or regime change? Amongst all of the majority of the progressive movements in Iran, and including the women's movement, I have the feeling that the majority is saying regime change. So, but that wouldn't be helpful for the future of Iran, since we have seen that in the last 40 years. Okay, sorry. Well, I have the feeling that except one of the Kurdish wings, political wing in Iran, the majority is mostly talking about regime change. But it is obvious that in Iran, there's urgent need of a system change because it's harming the whole country, the regime of the mullahs. And interestingly, I have seen that the women are now leading the process of uprisings in Iran. Some say revolution. Well, it's the fundament of revolution, what's happening now. And it was influenced by the revolution of Rojava. So the slogan taken over, the banner taken over, Jinjian Azadi, is saying a lot. And the women who are shouting Jinjian Azadi, it's obvious that they're asking for a system change. From the perspective of women, system change means giving up all kind of patriarchal dominancy over the women, starting over the women, but spreading in whole Iran. I think Öcalan was right when he said in this century, there's no space for the nation states based on singularity. Let's say if you want to exist in Iran, you have to follow, as a woman, to follow up the Sharia law. If you're Kurdish or Baluch or Ahwaz or Azari, you have to follow the Persian culture. So both are harming the whole country, and of course Iran is also important for the whole Middle Eastern region. That's why I hope and we hope that the women of Iran should be the first group in the society by overcoming the nationalism, which is now dividing the progressive elements, actors in Iran. I hope that the women will be able to be the dynamic of unity of oppressed people in Iran and not copying the mixed party politics, which are looking down on the Kurds from the Persian perspective, looking down on the Baluch, on the Ahwaz and Azari. And I think it's clear that Iran will change, must change. So the uprisings are continuing, and I'm looking forward that the result will be positive since it's in the hand of the women. That's why I'm positive.
I just wanted to, from an Indian perspective, just add a single sentence in response to that discussion, which is that I think we need a democratic space, at least, a flawed democratic space, to be able to fight for system change. So unless the Modi government in India goes, unless the Islamic Republic goes, unless Putin goes or whatever, you can't have the freedom to fight for systemic change, which we all want, revolutionary change.
Okay, and then, so just to repeat this question, you'd like to do that, perfect, thank you. There you go.
Right, okay, the question here is about ideology, but what I heard you asking me before was about gender dualisms. So I'm a little bit, is it the same person, this, or is this from somebody else? But just to make a comment on gender dualisms, I think it's a very multi-layered problem that you need to come to, both in terms of the biological basis of sex gender, of the psychology that's involved in raising children, of the cultural mores, of the political and economic structures that are related to gender. So what I'm saying is that at a biological level, sex gender is a continuum. It is not a dualism of masculine and feminine. It's a whole continuum and range of possibilities, biological possibilities. It is the patriarchal culture which has constructed the dualism of masculine versus feminine, humanity versus nature, production versus reproduction, and so on. So that would be, and we, as I just say, we really need to, it has to be taken apart because the question is very raw at this time in our history. It has to be taken apart, teased apart very carefully, bringing many kinds of tools of understanding to the question. So I hope that helps a little bit. Is that getting to what you were looking for? Yeah. Now, there's one here, it says about replacing one ideology with another. I don't know where, is that also from you or from somebody else? Or I'm not quite sure what you mean, which ideology you're talking about. I mean, obviously, we don't want to replace one ideology with another. But why ask it?
Then I misunderstood what you were saying earlier. If you say that we don't want that, then that answers my question.
We don't want what?
Replace an ideology with another.
I can't understand what you said. Yeah, I know, but which ideology are you talking about? Is replacing one with another?
It's fine.
Which ideology do you mean?
So your entire presentation was centered around patriarchy. It was centered around free labor of women. And my understanding is in order to dismantle patriarchy, which is also an ideology, you spoke about hegemony. How do we replace patriarchy by dismantling it and using feminism, which it itself is an ideology? Does that summarize your question?
Oh, so you're suggesting that ecofeminism is an ideology?
You mentioned it. It's an ideology. Every movement is based in an ideology. The liberation of Black women.
Yeah.
It has to be an ideology before it becomes a revolution. So the young people's question is, how do you explain replacing one ideology with another ideology?
Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay, I don't see ecofeminism as an ideology. If I'd had time to unpack more carefully what I had been prepared to say, it would be very clear that what contemporary ecofeminists are talking about is a materialist analysis. We're talking about real, lived, everyday material actions by women and by men, by Indigenous and non-Indigenous and so on, and teasing out the alternative understandings of our human relationships with the material natural world and with each other, which are not present and are not acknowledged in the dominant patriarchal ideology. So it's a materialist analysis. It is not understood as an ideology. An ideology is very often confused with a hegemony as well. Both of them often used in the sense of an idea system which consolidates power relations as they exist. But as I'm saying, with ecological feminism, what is being teased out are material relationships which have not been acknowledged in history to this point. So I hope that helps a little bit.
All right, so right now what we're going to do is we are at the same time going to take our 3 last questions. Each speaker will give an answer. It'd be wonderful if we could keep answers around the 3-minute mark, and then that will round out this panel for the afternoon. Okay, so I see a hand here in the 1, 2, 3, 4th row right there. I see over there, and then I'll take one right there. Which one was it? Here.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Shaba.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Shaba. I'm the General Secretary of the Sahrawi Women. I'm really happy for your solidarity. I'm here
para intercambiar
to interchange experiences, ideas from the women who are fighting for their freedom. My question to our comrade from India is, how can we get this solidarity while we have a lot of struggles at the same time? Women have lots of fights. Sahrawi women have been fighting for longer than 45 years in refugees from occupied territories beside Morocco. That fight is forbidden. How can we get that solidarity? It's a fight that's been fighting for very long, for the independence and for the freedom and for equality. Thank you very much.
Okay, and then we had 2 other questions. There was one in this area. Yes. We're going to have all the questions at once, and then the panelists will answer.
La pregunta va en español, castellano. ¿Así? Sí.
La pregunta es para Lolita. You talked about a ritual, the ritual you started with, you talked about spirituality. In this moment, how do we relive this spirituality when colonialism came? Because we kind of fight with this spirituality. It's very much confused with Christian religion and has nothing to do with that spirituality. So how we do reconcile with it? Because it's necessary for the struggle, for our everyday struggle.
And then we had one more question over here.
And then we have another question.
Anche la mia domanda è per Lolita, parlerò in italiano.
Also, my question is for Lolita. I will speak in Italian.
Innanzitutto ti ringrazio come
Thanks as a European woman because you name the witches in this context.
E per essere venuta.
And also to came here to see in our face and to say what you said to us. I want to ask you how is important for us to say it with pride, say with pride that we are witches, also as European women.
All right, well, thank you everyone for those questions. Who would like to?
¿Quién más quiere preguntar? ¿O quién va a empezar a contestar?
One second.
Bueno, en principio, en relación a la espiritualidad.
To start with, related to spirituality, really people that don't know us. For example, there are a lot of people here in Europe that they don't know us just because of their privilege and the ideas of supremacy. They also don't know us because they don't want to know us, because they think there is a real truth and there is a real truth in Europe. That's what we say, take it down a couple of lines because they can learn from us.
Entonces,
so,
si se mantiene esa supremacía, pues,
if that supremacy is still there, it keeps fucking because they are not gonna recognize their own spirituality. When we talk about spirituality, all the cosmovisions have their own spirituality because they already have their own way of living. And for example, I am Maya. I don't have that relationship with Christianism. Sometimes I get told the white women change you, and I say, no, my grandmother used to talk to me that there is no a big God. My grandmother used to talk to me about energy, and she said that we are energy. That's where it comes, the plural energy. That's where diversity comes. We are not women or men, lesbian, trans, travesti. We can be all expression. That is being told by our grandmothers. I really like their grandmother. That's how we build that spirituality. That's the connection. If we come back to the earth, to the moon cycles, if we relate deeply with this patriarchalized time, we can see how spirituality is going to connect with the moon, with the sun, with the air, with the mountain. And that's secret, because we are secret. That is also to be a witch, because in Guatemala, in the wrongly called Guatemala, in 2021, in the last year or this year, we have really been attacked. The witches, they have said that we put things in the bellies, that we are killers. They don't want to recognize that the Mayas, we are really, we are counselors, we have our own wisdom, millenary wisdom, and we recognize other wisdoms. It's not just about ourselves, about our wisdom. That's why all our ancestors are over there. No, it's not just Bertita Cáceres, it's Lina. They are all of them, because they are our ancestors. We recognize them. That's why we learn about the Sahara, the ancestors, the Sahrawi community, but also from Euskal Herria. All of those expressions, we embrace them, and that has to be recognized. There are witches, there are ancestrality here. Wake up your own witches, tell them that you are the memory of your grandmother, the history, and also that you are going to build to the future, to the horizon, to the feminist future. That's not about fake development. That's our millenary expression. We are going to keep fighting. That's why we say we'll bloom. The grandmother have said that we are going to bloom when the patriarchy is going to fall. It's going to fall. There is no doubt about it. It's going to fall. Sorry.
And we couldn't have ended on a more powerful note than that. We know who the enemies of women, life, and freedom are. We know who the women fighting for those values in different struggles around the world are. We've heard from some of those incredible women today. One more big round of applause. Thank you all so much for joining.
Comrade from Morocco asked a question which I haven't actually asked me the question. No time to answer? Okay. Really brief, like one sentence. Absolutely, I will not, we'll talk later, but I just wanted to say that absolutely the struggle of women and LGBTQ people in Morocco, in the Sahara. Yeah, so in Sahara, sorry, I asked, I missed this thing of who you were. I think that the struggles, you asked about solidarity. Absolutely, I think that, we are failing when we fail to know enough about struggles all over the world. But I think that this is a great occasion to talk, to know more, to learn, and absolutely support those struggles and
There are embassies everywhere in our respective countries. We can go protest, we can find ways to raise the voices in solidarity with all those struggles. Thanks.
So, don't go. The last announcement, it's really important. So we will have the lunch break. There will be 2 different places. Could you just listen for a second? There will be 2 different places, or maybe 3 also, where the food is distributed. But you have to give back your headphones, because after the lunch break, we will have workshops. Now it's really important for you to listen, because we will tell you something about the workshops. In the workshops, the system of translation is differently. So you all have to give back your headphones in this break. And I would like, where are the responsible person for the workshops? If they could just come to the front, would be really good. As you see, we have 8 workshops. Each of you can just select one of them. For example, resisting forced migration, women's liberation, health, economy, ecology, defense of language.